This is the Nextorch Saint Torch 31, and I know what you're wondering, what does Saint Torch mean? I don't know. Sounds pretty cool though. So Nextorch recently reached out to Matt and I asking if there were any lights they had that we were interested in reviewing, and this one really caught my eye. Not just because it's a giant 20,000 lumen monster of a flashlight, but also because this is one of only a few models I'm aware of on the market that has light detectors in the front, which acts as a safety feature. I think that's a feature that can actually be super useful in a lot of these really high power lights we've been looking at recently. So I was really curious to see how Nextorch actually implemented it in this light. Okay, before we get to that though, first we should talk about the actual performance of this light. So the head of this light has 8 XHP 50.2 LEDs. Nextorch is claiming that this is producing 20,000 lumens, and when I tested it, it did indeed measure actually slightly over 20,000 lumens. So it is extremely bright, it's very impressive at night, and it has a really nice balanced beam that's pretty floody but still throws quite far. So one thing you'll notice about this light upon comparison to others in this size class is it does not have any active cooling. There's no fan of any kind here. So it does have active temperature regulation in the driver that prevents it from overheating, but it's going to get a lot hotter than a light that will have a fan. And that's something we're going to talk about a bit more later. Overall though, the build quality of this thing is really great. This is a really well built light. It just feels super solid in the hand. I have no doubt that it's very durable. So right out of the gate, the lack of a fan is going to be a hit to performance, but I think it's going to count towards durability to some degree. The Saint Torch 31 pumps out a bit over 20,000 lumens on turbo for about a minute, at which point it starts decreasing down to 14,000 lumens at 2 minutes. At 3, the light drops to 4,000 lumens, which holds for about 40 minutes. In my test, it starts to oscillate a bit at this point, which is evidence of the light actively controlling output to keep heat under control. The turbo finally dies out at 186 minutes. Meanwhile, the high and medium modes sustained 2200 and 1500 lumens for 340 and 470 minutes respectively. Now, this performance is really impressive, but naturally, anything putting out this much power is going to get really hot, and this light definitely does. Several other lights in this class are even capable of starting fires because there's just so much heat coming out of the front of this light, and that's where these light detectors come in. This light has 4 light sensors in the front, and these quite literally detect light bouncing back, and they will drop output in order to compensate for that and prevent any fires. Now, I can tell you, just using it, that there is a huge difference once it steps down. If you put your hand in front of the light, you can feel that it is very hot, but the light detector will quickly step in and drop it down, and then it's fine. So I do think this is actually a really good way to prevent fires or anything if you set this light down or whatever. It's just a quick safety measure. I'm only aware of a couple other brands that are doing this. Olight is doing it in several of their modern lights, and a brand called Overready also offers it in their Boss light, which is a really expensive custom. So this is the third light that I'm aware of that does it. And as far as I know, it's the only big super light that does it. And I think this is actually a really good place for that technology. However, there are a couple of issues with this implementation. One of the main issues is because this is literally a light sensor, it relies on light bouncing back towards the sensor, it's not as capable of detecting darker objects. So if you hold the light up next to a white object versus a black object, it will take a lot longer to detect the black object, which means it can get closer and it can throw more heat onto that object. Ironically, that's a really big issue because black objects absorb more heat and thus are more likely to catch on fire. So that's definitely a flaw with this technology. It's something I've seen in other lights that use the same thing, so it's not a Nextorch problem, but it is an issue. And on that note, there's kind of an issue with this particular implementation just because this head here is so big. It's definitely possible to cover part of this lens and not all of it. Now, going back to Olight a bit, this was something I noticed in some of their smaller lights, but one of the more recent lights that I tried out has a proximity sensor as a ring around the lens, which is a really good design. This one here has multiple sensors scattered throughout the head, which does a decent job of mitigating that, but it's definitely still an issue. So as an example, the other night, me and my friend were out just playing with this light, testing it, and he set it down on the included bag that it came with, and it only covered part of the head, and it started burning the bag. There was smoke and a bad smell coming off of it. So yes, this light can definitely start fires, and this proximity sensor does help, but it doesn't necessarily stop the problem altogether. It's still possible to burn stuff with this. One other thing I'd like to mention about this light, the battery pack will unscrew from the head, and there's a switch in the top of the battery pack that allows you to use it as a large battery bank, which is pretty cool. The batteries in the pack are integrated. That's to be expected. You're just pulling a ton of current here, so companies aren't really going to give you replaceable batteries, but the whole pack itself can be easily unscrewed and replaced. We're here at the park with the Nextorch. This is a pretty big area right here, But as you can see, when we blast this on max output, this thing is incredibly bright, and it just pretty much overwhelms, honestly, this whole area with light. The hotspot is intense enough to get out there really, really well. The spill is actually not that wide, but there's enough extra light here in the periphery that I can still see my surroundings very well. So this light does a really good job projecting the light that you need out where you need it. If we look up here at this tree on our left, you can see the light illuminates pretty much the whole tree. Does an excellent job. Again, if we point it out here, the tree line is very clearly illuminated. Everything is very clearly illuminated. There's not much to say about it because it just makes everything super bright. It's definitely a cool white. There is some tint shift. You'll see the hot spot is cool white. Then there's a bit of a warmer, greener bit, kind of a corona around the hot spot. And then the edge of the spill tend towards kind of a cooler, more magenta tint as well. So not the greatest coloration, but it illuminates everything so clearly that I don't think it's really a big deal. It's not really why you're buying this light anyway. So you can see it's holding that light very well. It is stepping down, but it's still doing a great job. Again, if we drop it down to the lower outputs, you know, this is a very usable light for extended periods of time. So the UI is very simple. A forward clicky turns the light on with a click, and a half press cycles through the modes. It always turns on to turbo and cycles downwards through the modes. If the sensor drops the turbo output, a half press will bump it up to a higher output again before cycling back down with consecutive presses. Overall, a very fast and easy to use system, and while it's not my preference, I think the instant turbo makes sense in this type of light. One thing you'll notice too is this handle here on top. This is actually an accessory that comes with the light. It's a screw-on handle, so you don't have to attach it and use it if you don't want to. And you can also attach it anywhere on the body that you prefer. I have it right here kind of in the middle where I think it gives it a really nice balance. I like that they include this handle. It could be a little more comfortable though. So this is another really cool thing Nextorch includes with the light. This is a nylon bag here for carrying the light and its accessories. It's got MOLLE webbing on the side here, on the back, so you can attach it to like a backpack or something. I actually really appreciate this addition. I think it's super nice. It's well made and it's just convenient for carrying this super large light. Here's the thing about this light, my biggest critique. This guy costs $480, which on its own I think is a fair price. Like it's not bad. It's a very well-built light. It's got good electronics in it. It performs well, but that's just kind of expensive, especially for a light that doesn't have any active cooling. By way of comparison, the AceBeam X75, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, it's a base price of $400, and then this battery pack here makes it $600. So this right here is only about $120 more than the Torch 31. The thing is, this light is 4 times brighter, and it sustains 20,000 lumens, which is this thing's max. So performance here is way better, and that's due to the active cooling implementation AceBeam has in here. So it does become a little difficult because even though this light has that unique feature, even though it is a really good light, that's just a hefty asking price when other lights in a similar, slightly higher price bracket perform so much better. Now I do think the Nextorch would be able to sustain significantly more output if they had added a fan in here. And, you know, it is cheaper, and I'm sure it has better waterproofing and dust proofing and all of that, but ultimately I just think $480 is a little too much for this light, considering the competition. I don't think it's a bad value. I think it's actually a really good light, and I've had a lot of fun playing with this. It's just extremely bright, and it's super fun to use. The form factor is actually really great, especially with this handle. You can get it really well balanced, and I like that a lot. A lot of other flashlights I've used with handles are not very well balanced, so it's kind of a little thing, but it's just really nice here. Yeah, overall, I actually really like the Torch 31. I think it's a really good light if you're looking for something that's super powerful for like search and rescue use, or, you know, I don't know. I don't really know why you need 20,000 lumens, to be honest, but it's awesome and it's super fun to use. So if you're interested in this light, we will have a coupon code as usual down in the description. You can go check that out. And if you want to see some other giant flashlights, there's some more really cool videos on this channel, and we have a few on the way as well. So thanks for watching.